Welcome to Evening Rounds, a podcast that takes you behind the scenes in medicine. Tonight's conversation is with Dr. Janine Luke, a dermatologist known for building lifelong friendships with patients and addressing skincare myths on social media. Also, if you like what you hear tonight, please subscribe. Well, Janine, thank you so much for being on our Evening Rounds podcast tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to spend this time with you all.
So I'm an interventional cardiologist or a plumber of the heart, and I have a tendency to look at people's right wrists because I'm looking at them saying, if I'm doing a case on them, how hard would it be to cannulate the radial artery, which is how we get to the heart? My question for you as a dermatologist is, are you doing sort of that inventory of people you're looking at just because you do it all day? Or talk to me about what's in your brain when you're looking at people.
So normally, I'm first and foremost a medical dermatologist. So, obviously if someone has a very obvious skin condition or they have a mole that looks suspicious, that's something that draws my eye. I do cosmetic dermatology, but for the most part, I'm kind of talking to people, especially if I'm not at work, I'm kind of off and kind of doing my own thing. That being said, I do get approached all the time.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So you're a dermatologist. What do you think about this, and this? And of course, we look at things and our eye naturally goes to what's aesthetically pleasing and, what I think someone may benefit from. Usually when I'm in general conversation, I'm not really analyzing anyone unless they've had too much work done. And then I'm kind of like, oh, that was a little bit too much, which I feel like some people nowadays are going for that look.
Yeah. Do you feel like so you're not sitting at the beach or at a softball game going, oh, that SPF? No, or not enough? Or do you have those thoughts and feelings?
No, especially about SPF. I love SPF. I'm a strong proponent for sunscreen use. And so as long as people are using it, a lot of people say, well, Dr. Luke, which sunscreen do you recommend? I actually have only a few rules. One, it has to be an SPF 30 or higher. I also recommend that they, use something that's broad spectrum, meaning it's covering both UVA as well as UVB. A lot of people don't know that SPF is just a measure of protection for UVB. And so there are other things, other wavelengths. We also have now visible light. And then make sure that they reapply. So I think that's the biggest thing that people forget is that they'll put their sunscreen on at like 8 o'clock in the morning and then they'll go out for lunch or they'll go out at the end of the day or they're out for like 6 hours. And so I think as long as people are wearing sunscreen, I'm very, very happy. It's just those who, are like, I don't want to wear sunscreen or, doc, I don't even think that does anything. That's where I feel like I have the biggest hurdles. But if people are out and they're protecting their skin, I'm very happy.
Oh, I love that. I feel like you do so much helpful education just like that on your own personal Instagram. And I feel like social media right now is exploding with skincare things and myths, and you never kind of know who to trust. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how you educate and try to dispel some of these myths on social media?
Yeah, I love to use social media, but then I kind of started just realizing I see, anywhere from, 30 plus patients a day. But I can create a video, I can create a post, and I can educate, hundreds, thousands. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I really understood the power of social media in that I could really send a broader message and really reach a lot of people and give them good information. Because like you mentioned, it's so hard to sift through a lot of the info that's out there.
Yeah, I feel like skincare has become a huge trend.
Yeah. There's a lot of people that are interested in skincare. And, for me as someone who, highly values this, takes great care of my skin, and I also have 2 young daughters, I understand that less is sometimes best. And so you don't have to have a super complicated regimen. I share with people all the time, your skincare routine only needs to have a few steps. You need to cleanse to make sure you're removing debris and, oil and whatever pollutants or things that you've come into contact with, moisturizing your skin. And then lastly, you want to protect. And so those are kind of the main steps. And then everything else is icing on the cake. It's a little nuanced. nuance, and, we can add in some things depending.
So this is where I've been going wrong, because I haven't
Yeah.
been clean, cleansing and moisturizing and protecting. So
I know you're on like a 15-step stuff.
So this is helpful. Even at age 48, I can
Absolutely.
self-correct. So when I'm walking through department stores and I stop at a makeup counter, which I do frequently. by the way.
Frequently. I mean, that's one thing I know about you.
But I do look at lotions. There is, a lot of product designed for men. I'm blown away by the cost.
Yeah.
And I start thinking to myself, how much is the cost of the product inside versus what is the marketing cost? And so my question for you, is there any possible way I can cleanse, moisturize, and protect myself for under $100?
Absolutely. People can literally get the job done with things that are available over the counter or even a prescription if they need it. But you could also, some people like the experience of using products, the fragrances, the different feelings, the way things go on. And so that's also plays a role. And so if you can, create a very luxurious product that, tends to be a little pricey, if it's within your budget, hey, I tell people do whatever brings them joy. I do view skincare as a form of self-care. When I'm rushing in the morning, I'm just trying to get the job done. I'm going to do my steps, minimal steps. But at night, when I have more time, I can, use some of my other products that I really enjoy. And so there's that opportunity for both. But, you can really kind of offer general recommendations or give somebody something that you think would benefit them.
So if you're doing the base sort of product, then the rest is, if it brings you pleasure and enjoyment and satisfaction at the end of the day, then by all means go after it.
Absolutely. And there are some other ingredients, like say people want an anti-aging ingredient. That's where retinols come involved, or say they have, issues with hyperpigmentation or dark spots. Then there are other things that you can incorporate.
Interesting. It feels like so many people these days are interested in the anti-aging more than they are in like the skin cancer element. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And sometimes that's a huge motivator too for people to wear sunscreen. I find that this tends to be an issue, particularly for people of color, because the incidence of skin cancer is not as high as people with lighter skin tones, but people with darker skin types can get discoloration, they can get disorders of pigmentation, and that's where it's more of an impetus and they're more willing to use their sunscreen, and then they get the benefit of also getting some skin cancer prevention.
You have many hats that you wear on campus here, but one of them is you are responsible for training this generation's dermatologists.
Yes.
Right? That's an awesome responsibility. And I would like to hear a little bit about how that impacts your career, your life, particularly in our community. We have many different people of color. And that's the beauty of our region. I think it's a wonderful place to live and to work. But I also see that as a huge opportunity as a dermatologist.
Absolutely.
To train those residents to be those new dermatologists coming out and being experts in recognizing
Absolutely.
diseases that can cross the spectrum of all skin color types. And so I wanted to hear a little bit from you about that role that you have here in the organization.
Yeah, so I love being a residency program director. I help select, like you mentioned, the dermatologists of the future. It's been incredibly gratifying because, not only are these students like bright and, very interested and really want to make a difference, but I know that they're going to make an impact in the community, our greater Loma Linda community, but also be leaders in my specialty as well. So that's one aspect that I really love. But to your point, when I actually became a resident and was learning about dermatology, there was no like skin of color dermatology. There was no subspecialty.
Really?
And people just were like, okay, skin is skin, but the default was lighter skin. So it's even been shown, all of our textbooks and, the way that we learn about dermatology, it's all in lighter skin. So over the course of the last decade and even beyond, we've done more to really educate not only dermatologists, but also the training programs. That's been something that's been huge.
Wow.
Where we're trying to implement curricula and really make it more of an intentional focus to train people in all skin types so that they're comfortable, especially with not just skin, but also hair, different hair types and hair textures, and really being able to help patients, no matter where they come from. So it's been wonderful to really teach our students as well as our residents and really show them how much and how important this type of dermatology is.
So it sounds like that field as a whole is really behind, and it's really incredible that you're really bringing that to the forefront here at Loma Linda.
Yeah, there are, like I mentioned, some institutions where they don't really have a robust, skin of color curriculum. And so they, sometimes residents have to do outside rotations. I'm thankful that I did get the training that I received. And of course, I've been, working here at Loma Linda for, over a decade, seeing a lot of patients with darker skin types. And so I've really been able to bring that to our residents and our students to offer them a wide variety and just really kind of round out their training.
That must be such a blessing for your patients.
It's awesome. I do get patients from all over, people who, driven, hours to come and see
I
me.
believe it, yeah.
Unfortunately, within dermatology, people of color, there's not a lot of dermatologists. And in particular, Black dermatologists, there's only 3% of all dermatologists who are Black or African American.
Wow.
It sometimes makes it difficult because patients are really looking and they want someone that can relate to them. But a lot of times that may not be the case. And so that's why it's really important that we train everyone.
Yes.
So that way, no matter who they go to, they're comfortable and they can, really be confident that they're going to get the care that they need.
Absolutely. How did you decide to go into this field? How is this, it's so incredible that you're at 3%. That's just unbelievable to me.
Yeah. So I always wanted to be a doctor. Even when I was a young girl, my dad, he used to play sports and he would come home with all these little cuts and bruises. And I was like, oh, Dad, I'm going to fix them. And so that kind of initially sparked my interest in medicine and helping. And then when I was in high school, I decided, okay, I really want to go to medical school. I did not have any doctors in my family. I didn't really know many doctors, but I knew that I wanted to help in that way. And thankfully, my parents, they were always very supportive and they were just like, well, whatever you want to do, just go do it. So originally, I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. I loved children. I loved working with them. I had done a lot of mentorship, in all of my college work. And then I didn't know anything about dermatology. And so it wasn't until I started learning about it during medical school that I was like, I can kind of take a look and recognize something and really be able to see what someone had. And that really intrigued me. And then I worked with a dermatologist who was at UCLA. She was a Black dermatologist. She let me shadow her. She was amazing. And that's when I was like, oh, I can do a different variety of things, procedural things, medical things, cosmetic things. And so that's really what sealed the deal. And then when I realized that there were not many people like me and that there were needs that weren't being met because people didn't really understand, then I was like, this is definitely what I want to do.
That's awesome.
You touched on something there in mentorship, right? I think many of us in medicine have had one or two individuals that we've had a number of, takes a village, right? So we've had a whole host of people that lift us up, but there's one or two particular individuals that sort of, stand out, right?
Sure.
And for many people, it's in the family, an uncle, an aunt, a parent, or a sibling or something. So I have just tons of admiration and respect for people who said, this is what I want to do. Yeah. I don't have that person that I can just go to, but I have the drive to do it. That's phenomenal.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I can definitely credit, I've always been a driven person and, someone who's highly motivated, but I had a group of friends in medical school and we studied together. We did, everything together and we are still friends to this day. So it's really cool because it's definitely support. My family's always been very supportive. And then I've always had people that I looked up to who are gracious enough to, give me advice or help me out. And so that's why, to your point, whenever people reach out to me from across the country, these people are all over and they're like, Dr. Luke, will you help me? And I can't tell them no. It's difficult because, you want to be a high quality mentor. And so I've had to kind of change the way that I mentor now. But I try not to tell anybody no, even if things are busy and there's a lot going on.
Wow. And you have a national platform through your position. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm active in a couple of different organizations, and I've also been, very, very active in trying to increase diversity within dermatology. So in our national organizations, I have really taken a stance in helping with a lot of the programming that we do to really help people who are underrepresented in medicine and who are trying to make their way in dermatology. I work a lot with the Skin of Color Society. So I've been their technology and media co-chair for many years now. And we've really kind of taken our platforms and really, pushed them to higher heights. And so it's been excellent for me to kind of see these different things grow and to kind of really put energy and effort into things that, now have a national presence.
So you have a ton of output. You're a sought after dermatologist. People are coming from all over. You see many, many patients every day. You're responsible for the training program. You're a mentor to many. You are involved in national societies. So that's a lot of output. It's a lot of output. So my question for you is, what do you input it with to make sure that you can sustain the output? So what are the things that refuel your batteries outside of work?
Yeah, so I do a few things outside. One, I have 2 daughters and I have a husband. So I do a lot of family things. We do a lot together. I'm very close with my friends that are still local. And so hanging out with them, connecting with them. I do a lot of physical activity. So I like to take walks. We have a pool outside. So when I am able to get out there, they get out there all the time.
I bet.
When I'm able to, but even just, working on my computer, watching them splash around, that's something that's great too. I like to travel. And when we're not so busy with their activities, just really kind of having a weekend to not do anything, that's always great.
Isn't it?
I value my sleep, so I always get my sleep every night. That's something that, is kind of non-negotiable. If I have a deadline or something, maybe, but then I'm making up for it. At least I'm trying.
Because you have a special gold star. You're a softball mom, aren't you?
I'm a softball mom.
Ooh, that's a big job. That's a lot of time.
It's a big job. It's a lot of time. But thankfully, like I mentioned, my husband, he is phenomenal. He's a teacher. So his schedule's way better than mine. So when I'm in traffic trying to get home from clinic, he's able to take them to practice. Sometimes I'm like, okay, game starts at 6. I'll meet you there.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a team effort and we really work very well together. He's very hands-on with them. And I played softball in high school. He didn't play at all, but he's there all the time. So he can throw with them.
Nice.
It's funny because they're like, Mom, we like throwing with you. Dad throws too hard. And so I'm like, wait, what are you trying to say there?
I got an arm.
But it's just fun because I do get out there and throw with them. I do give them tips, but I let the coaches coach because you know how that goes. When, you're the parent, they're like, whatever, you don't even know.
Yeah.
And so I just love that I can still be hands-on with them, but my husband is able to really do a lot of the heavy lifting, but I can still be present for the majority of the stuff they have.
That's amazing. That's a heavy schedule for sure.
It is.
Yeah, no, it's kind of continuous, but you get one life, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to go hard.
Go hard, right? When we came up with evening rounds, we spent a lot of time trying to think of a name that would reflect what the intent of our conversation was, and that is to reflect more on just the doings of medicine, but kind of behind the scenes or the other part of practice, right? Which is here at Loma Linda, it's whole person care, right? And I think we believe in it, and we spend a lot of time and energy teaching and delivering that care. So when you think about evening rounds and sort of the other aspects of medicine, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of whole person care. And it's funny because my patients, they're not just a diagnosis. They're not just a condition. And so the residents always get on my case because, I talk a lot. And this is part of why I love medicine. I want to get to know my patients. And so we talk a lot. I pray with my patients. I want to know what's going on in their lives. And I'm thankful that they feel comfortable enough to share with me. It's funny because patients will say, Dr. Luke, you're my favorite doctor. I wish you were my primary. And I'm like, no, you don't want me to be your primary.
I actually think I've said that because that's so true.
But that brings me joy. That refuels me as well, is just like having these wonderful lifelong relationships. I see families, and so I see their kids, the parents, the grandparents, the aunts and uncles. That's what really I enjoy. And so when I'm teaching my residents, I tell them the derm part is easy, right? We can read the textbooks. We know exactly what to give them, but you have to understand who's in front of you. Are they comfortable with the diagnosis, with the treatment plan? Do they understand what they have? And those are all the things that nuance medicine. And those are the things that really make you a good clinician if you're able to navigate that part. And so that's over the 3 years what we try to instill in them. It's like, yes, you're going to be a solid dermatologist, but can you help the person that's sitting right in front of you?
You hit on so many what I think are profoundly important things. I remember in medical school, one of the classes that stood out to me more than any other class was taught by Dr. Christensen, and that was understanding your patient, right? Because we spend so much time understanding the diagnosis.
Yes.
But if you can't impart what you're trying to accomplish with that patient in a way that the patient can understand it, it's like somebody speaking Hebrew and someone's speaking Greek.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think that's a huge part of the educational process that sometimes doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah.
So the fact that you do that to me is so important. And it's no doubt why patients love you, because you do that. And that's to me where the art and science of medicine intersect, right?
Yeah. And we talk about it all the time when I'm talking with the residents, because they'll say like, oh, Dr. Luke, patient's not better. And I'm like, well, why? And they're like, well, I didn't ask. Did they get the medicine? And I remind them, our goal is to get our patients better. So if they're not better, we need to figure out why. And there are so many things that patients come in with. There are barriers. There are, so many challenges that they face. And it's important for us to really get to it. Like if it wasn't covered and they never got it, well, of course they're not better. But then again, I have to remind the patients, like if you don't get your medicine and it's been more than 2 weeks, you need to let me know. So that way we can kind of work behind the scenes and make sure that you get what you need. But again, I'm constantly reminding them that our expectation is for them to get better. And if there's not, then we need to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. There was a patient that I'll never forget. We were on CCU rounds, so our intensive care unit for heart patients, and the patient was labeled as non-compliant. And as a physician, when you hear non-compliant, there are connotative overtones.
A lot of assumptions.
Like there's a huge host of assumptions, right? So I went in and let's just call her Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones, I understand that you weren't able to take your medications. And she said, Doc, here's the deal. My daughter died. And I had to decide whether I was going to pick up my prescriptions or pay for her funeral.
Yeah.
So that's non-compliant by definition, right? But that's not understanding your patient.
That's not the story.
That's not the story behind that. Yeah. So there's so much there, right? The patient's not better. Well, why?
Yeah.
And oftentimes there's a really good reason.
Absolutely. And I think if we just remember to ask, that's where we really get to it. And that's what I try to remind the residents all the time. It's like, some of these things we can fix. Now, some of these things we cannot fix. Sometimes if people have like crazy copays or, we can certainly try to connect patients with support and things of that nature. But a lot of these things we can work on and we can help them with.
Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of being one of your patients, and I was so fascinated because I thought we were just going to talk about skin. I thought you were just going to give me some creams and we're going to work it out. But you were asking me so many questions about my sleep and about really, you were really, it's so much, I know this sounds cheesy, but it's so much, it's deeper than skin deep. with you. And it's really impressive to me that you go to that level to really get to what is the issue we're having here.
Yeah, because that's really what we want to try to nail. We want to make sure that, one, patients feel heard.
Yeah.
A lot of times patients will say, like, you're the first one who like sat down and listened to me.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised by that. Because I feel like as physicians, we do want to help our patients. We want to do as much as we can. But I also understand, the realities of medicine too. And it's tough. I mean, you got 15 minutes, it's sometimes difficult. But I do try to, at least on that first visit for sure, make that connection. Like, we're not going to get through all the whole list that you have.
Yeah.
I know that you waited. I appreciate your patience. But I remind patients that with me, like, once you're in the club. We can tackle this over months. We can tackle this over years. Because I understand, patients, they're like, oh my gosh, I waited. I just want to get everything addressed. But some things don't have a 15-minute, solution. And I think it's important to remind patients of that as well.
Jean, you mentioned something that grabbed my attention, that you knew early on that you were in the business of helping people. Your dad comes home with a scratched leg or something. You're like, I can do that. I can fix that for you. Where does that come from?
Something within has always wanted to help others. It's kind of like the legacy that I want to leave. I want to be able to show these are all the lives that I've actually touched. Not just my patients, but then also in my life too. I want people, I can't remember where it is, but they talk about, live your life now, you're planning for your eulogy or something. But that's always been something that's resonated with me, that, I really want to show the people here that I interact with now, how much I love them, how much I appreciate them, how much I want to help them while I'm here, and not have it be, oh, I wish I could have done something after the fact.
If you always live for tomorrow, you never live for today.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to think about your life as what could have been, because you're always thinking about what you wished it was rather than what it is. And so I think that's a good rule of thumb to live by for all of us.
Absolutely.
It's a carpe diem, right? Seize the day. But I think it was very profound to me when you had mentioned as a child that yearning desire to help. So you've certainly chosen the path that has allowed you to do that, right? And now you could have been an accountant or a CPA and helped people, but it would have been in a different way for sure.
Yeah, I definitely was always interested in science and how things work. And just knowing that the body can repair itself and heal itself, that was something that was very interesting to me even early on. And it's become, even more interesting as I go through this journey in medicine, just really seeing there are things that we can do and we have control over, things that we don't really have control over. And that's why, again, I love to pray with my patients. I want them to know that no matter what they're going through, that I'm there to help and support and do what I can.
I can see why you're sought out and loved by many. And I just can't thank you enough for joining us this evening here on our Evening Rounds podcast.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to share some of my insights and really talk with you about why I love medicine so much.
And that's clear.
Thank you.
A special thanks to the sponsor of Evening Rounds, La Loma, who has provided banking services to the Loma Linda community since 1955. Their support helps us continue bringing you episodes focused on health, story, and mission.